Yeah, like you said, I'm Mary Helen Miller. I work at the Chattanooga Times Free Press. I'm a journalist, and I write a bit, and I also produce video and audio, and I do some web development building. Lately, I've been really interested in building maps that show things about Chattanooga. So I was going to talk today about that. So I started working at the paper a couple of years ago. I had come from the radio station, the NPR station WTC. I was a radio reporter. So I'm really interested in telling stories in different kinds of media. And when I started at the paper, I was starting to notice all of these really awesome graphics that the New York Times was doing. And so I'll show you some things that caught my eye. Let's see how this looks. I'm going to scoot this over. So this says, at the Republican convention, the words being used. So a look at how often speakers at the Republican National Convention have used certain words and phrases so far based on an analysis of transcripts. So these are all words that they were using in the Republican convention. It looks kind of like a regular word cloud, but you can see that you can kind of move them around, which is fun. And you'll notice that the bigger ones kind of have more gravity than these little guys, and the other balls stick to them more. And you can type in your own phrase that you want to look up. So like, I'm going to type in America, because I bet they said America a lot and it's not on the list. So there pops America in, 379 mentions. And the cool thing about this is you can scroll down and see all these transcripts, and it highlights every time they use the word. So I thought this was a pretty cool application. All it is a huge data set, and they've visualized it this way in a way that you can interact with, which is pretty cool. So here's another one. This was kind of, think back to Hurricane Sandy. The National Weather Service makes hourly wind forecasts based on current conditions and computer modeling. Here are the forecasts made as Hurricane Sandy came ashore. So you can kind of scroll through the forecast and see the map change. And you can just glance and see how fast the wind was, how fast the forecast was for the wind by looking at this little legend up here. And you can flip through. So you know that every little piece of this map has different pieces of data attached to it. And every time you flip to a different hour, a new piece of data is coming up, and it's translated into a color, which is what we see here. So I thought that was pretty cool. And one more political one. This is looking back at different elections over the years. So we always talk about swing states, the states in elections that could go either way. But this actually looked back at the Electoral College votes for every state. And it looked at the percentage that went either Democrat or Republican. So you can look at a state like California, and you can actually trace its path down to how much it's been blue or red over the years. And some of these, like in the South down here, there were some big switches around the time of Carter Ford and Johnson Goldwater. Anyways, all this is a huge data set, but they've taken it and turned it into this really cool application that you can really dig into. So I was looking at these, and I realized that they were all made with this JavaScript library. You guys may have heard of it. You have now anyways, D3. And I wanted to learn how to make something even a fraction as cool as this stuff, so I thought I should learn how to write a little bit of code. So I started by diving into D3, which I don't think I would recommend for anybody else, but I have been able to use it a little bit in some projects at the paper here in town. So what is D3? It's a JavaScript library, like I said, just like any other JavaScript library that you've used before. The New York Times uses it a lot, and it was actually developed by Mike Bostock, who works at the New York Times. So it's a really powerful tool in journalism. It was developed for journalism, but it can be used for other purposes too. Another guy who uses it to do some really cool stuff is Scott Murray. And he calls himself a code artist. He teaches at the University of San Francisco. And so he's a designer first, but he uses D3 to make these really cool applications. And I'm going to show you some of those because I think they really illustrate how powerful the tool is. So one thing it's really good at, which I use D3 a lot for, is making maps. So I don't know if you can see all this. Yeah. The Commonwealth Youth Development Index. So here's a map of the world. And you can see that every color has a color. And it's showing where it ranks on the Youth Development Index. So the dark blue ones rank high, and the light yellow ones are ranked low. They're not doing as well. Whoop. So we're zooming in a little bit there. So this is cool because D3 is coloring the map automatically for us, and D3 is also actually drawing every country for us, which is cool. But it also is, we're able to use D3 to put all this other data on the map. So we have the rank or the Youth Development Index, but we also have a lot of other data under the surface. So here's Kazakhstan. You can see where it ranks on the Youth Development Index over here. It's kind of on the high end. It's really high on education. It's not doing so well in political participation or civic participation. You can look at Australia. And as you notice as you click around, it's just kind of a slick thing. These transition really smoothly. D3 is handling that for us too. Or say we want to go look just at Africa. And we click on that, and D3 is handling that really smooth transition for us, which is pretty cool. So that was Scott Murray. Here's another map project that he's done. And this is taking historic weather station data for the UK. And so there's tons of data here. This is just 1999 to 2010 down here. So here's the hours of sunshine per month. And we can click through to all the different months and see how much sunshine there was in every part of the country. And if you look closely, you'll see that there are all these different squares. So again, every square has its own set of data that's translated into these colors, and it makes it really easy just to click through them. I haven't pressed this animation, but we can see what that does. Okay, now that'll do it automatically for us. So that's kind of cool. We can stop that. So D3 is really great at maps, but it can also be used for other kinds of visualizations. This is also from Scott Murray. It's pretty cool. It's called Kindred Britain. And all of these are different people in British history. So we can kind of look. Sigmund Freud, he's kind of interesting. We can drag him over to the side here, because we might want to look at him more closely. I don't know. Who looks cool here? John Donne. Let's look at John Donne. Okay, so we're going to drag him over on top of Sigmund Freud here. And this shows us how they're connected. So again, they're just taking this huge database, and this is what you can use. It's this really deep interactive web application. It's more than just a visualization. So John Donne is here, and we can see he's married to Anne Moore, and all of these connections, so on and so forth, until I'm guessing off the screen over there is Sigmund Freud down here. There he is. Cool. So you can do these really cool applications. You can also use D3 to do really, really simple stuff, which is probably the place to start. You can draw a bar chart with it. Or a line chart. Or you can take something really simple and put a twist on it. So like, say I want a bar chart to appear in alphabetical order, but I want the user to be able to see who's in first and last place really easily. You can make a sortable bar chart. So here that is in alphabetical order, and we want to sort it. And D3 lets us do this really kind of cool transition. They're a little translucent, so you can kind of follow where every bar is going and sort them back and forth like that. And actually, my favorite example that I've come across, also from Scott Murray, is probably the most useless example. It's actually really dumb, but it's really fun. It's called the United States of Bouncy Balls. And like, you should never use this for a real application, but it's kind of fun because you can hover over every state and it turns into a bouncy ball. And so like, this is fun and completely pointless, but it kind of shows you what D3 can do. So it's drawing this map, it's turning it really smoothly into these shapes and kind of giving them the characteristics of a bouncy ball. So look that up and have fun with it. It's like way too much fun for how simple it is. Sorry I'm moving my screen around so much. I hope I'm not making anyone motion sick or anything. So D3 stands for Data-Driven Documents. And it's a visualization tool, but it's more than that because it allows you to bind data to elements in your HTML. And that's the most powerful thing about it. So it has a really great website, d3.js.org. And there's tons and tons of examples here. So like if you want to get started on digging into this stuff, visit this website and you'll see a lot of examples. There are the thumbs. And there's a lot of documentation. I mean, like you can click on these. Most of them kind of walk you through how to do it right below. There's your code. And if you Google D3 examples, there's another site that's really awesome that will pop up. And it has like 3,000 examples of D3. And you can type in the search box what you're looking for. And chances are someone else has already done a project like that. So you can get started on it pretty easily. So like I said, you use it like any other JavaScript library. You just need to reference it once, and then you can have everything D3 has to offer at your fingertips to write in your script. It loads in some data for you, and then you can take that data to load in new elements on the page and manipulate them dynamically, which is what the JavaScript's doing for you. So I've been using D3 to tell stories about Chattanooga at the paper. And when I started making visualizations, I would try to keep my ears open for what other reporters were working on in the newsroom. And like when I heard something that might have a data set or a map with it, I would be like, let me work on that project with you. I can make it cooler. But I'm finding more and more now people are coming to me and saying like, hey, I want a map to go with my story. So that's kind of cool that shifted a little bit. And also I've been working on some projects where I just think something would be a cool visualization and it turns out we write a story to go with it or to explain it. So it can actually be the seeds of a story itself. So I've been making maps lately this summer and this fall. Here's one story we published this summer. Despite Chattanooga's successful tech revolution, not all have shared in the gig renaissance. So the point of this story is basically like that we have the gig and not a lot of people are using it. That's not really news to anybody, I don't think. But what I did is I called EPB up and I asked them if they could tell me who subscribed to the gig and to 100 megabit per second internet, just the really high speeds that EPB offers. And they said, well, we can't tell you that because of privacy concerns for our customers, but we could tell you how many people per zip code. So that was our compromise. And so they sent me a list by zip code in their coverage area of how many people subscribed to the gig. So like I got all the shape files for all the zip codes and I loaded them on this map with D3. And then I had to cut out all the ones that were like half in EPB's coverage area because it's not really fair to say that like 4% of residents subscribe to the gig when it's really only half of them even have access to it. So I cut those out manually. And then I loaded in this data set. And so they gave me the raw number. So like Signal Mountain here, there's 263 customers. This is as of, I think, July to the gig. So I looked up my census data and realized that's 4% of the population. So it got this dark blue color. So just at a glance, you can see like, here's Signal Mountain is the dark one, Appleton, and Lookout Mountain. That might not be surprising. And then here in downtown Chattanooga, there's like almost no customers in some of these neighborhoods. Alton Park has 5. For instance, Eastlake has 20, et cetera. But I also wanted to look at 100 megabits per second. So I used the same map, loaded in a different data set, and this popped up. And then here it is combined. So this was kind of cool. And actually, EPB, after they saw this, they were like, we haven't visualized it in this way. And actually, we haven't even really looked at the data this way. So that was kind of cool that they saw it and that it could make the story that we ran a lot richer. So that was kind of like just like a daily story that ran. I mean, this took me longer than a day to make, but but it wasn't a big story. I've also been able to help make some of our bigger stories a little richer. So this is a story that we ran this fall about Franklin Mccauley. He is a resident of Chattanooga, and he has been dedicated for a really long time to trying to bring races together, but specifically, like, he tries to get white people and black people to be friends with each other. And he throws these dinner parties where he'll invite half white people and half black people and try to help them form friendships, really. So he has a really long history in town, and he's also part of a really big family. Mccauley School is named after his family, Mccauley Avenue. Anyway, so this is this big profile that my colleague Joan did about him. So I made a couple of maps to try to help tell the story a little bit better. So let's see. He's been around for a while doing this kind of work, and we wanted to look at historically and today where white people and black people live in Chattanooga. So these are all census tracts, and we drew all those on, and then I loaded all of the census data into it too from today. So you can see in every census tract what % of white and black people live there, what % below poverty, children below poverty, and for some reason the median household income isn't working anymore, but at one point you could see that. And you can kind of look around Chattanooga. We'll zoom out a little bit so we can get a bigger view. And actually, I had all of Hamilton County for this. So that is the shape of Hamilton County. And this is downtown Chattanooga here. But I also wanted to look back to 1950 in like a completely different era here and see what it looked like back then. And that was a lot more of a challenge because census tracts change every year. So you have to have a completely different file that describes the shape of every census tract. And in fact, in 1950, they didn't even really do much of a census, or I guess they didn't have census tracts for every area in the country. So like Chattanooga was one on a very short list of places where they actually had divided into census tracts. So I was really excited when I realized that we had data for Chattanooga for 1950. I mean, like, go out to Saudi Daisy and you'll get nothing back then. So that was cool. And then I had to find the 1950 census with the information that I wanted taken by census tract. And that was a lot more difficult than I could have anticipated because there's a lot of ways to take data. Taking race data by census tract in 1950 was very specific. I looked around for a very long time and I finally found the 1950 census from Chattanooga, like a terrible photocopy that I plugged into a data sheet. And after all of that, I came up with this map. And there's not as much information on this one because it wasn't available, but you still get the basics of the % white and % black for every census tract. And actually, I mean, you can see a lot of the neighborhoods are really similar when you look at first glance as to where the dividers are. I mean, really, the river is a big divider for us in Chattanooga. So that was just a way to add a little depth to this story about this guy who's been trying to get the races to come together for a really long time. And so I did one more map with this story as well, which was a lot simpler. And it's just looking at schools in Hamilton County today. And so every one of these dots is a school in Hamilton County. And it's not surprising that they kind of fall in the same categories of blue and red as the other maps, but it's just to reemphasize the point that even our schools are really segregated. And so you can kind of go through and see that in the rural areas, the schools are blue, and in the inner city, they're red. And I put in some other data about Hispanic and Asian population because that's grown since the 50s and is a big part of our schools today. So the next two examples I'm going to show you, one, I don't know if it'll ever see the light. Actually, I don't know if either of them will ever see the light of day. They're both works in progress. This is something I was just messing around with, and I don't even really know if it's that useful, but I wanted to visualize traffic on I-24 because I feel like I'm stuck in traffic sometimes in random times, and I wanted to like see what it looked like and when to not drive on I-24. So I actually looked at a Google map, and you can look at historical, or not historical, you can look at the average traffic for any given point in time on Google Maps. So I measured out like how much was red on I-24 and how much was yellow and green for every time. So these are all average times, but you can, you can look up like Monday at 5 a.m. and see how much traffic there is. So like in the other maps that I showed you, there were a few distinct categories, and if the number fell between like 1 and 2, it would be a certain shade of red or purple. This one, actually, I just gave it a starting color and an ending color. So like this really light yellow and this really dark navy. And D3 assigned the color to every square for me. So we can get these really subtle differences. You can't even really tell that these two are different. They are slightly different, but not enough for us to really care. So I manually categorized like what qualified as light traffic, no traffic, moderate, and heavy traffic. So like, I think this map would be more interesting if we lived somewhere with more traffic, because like there's really not that much. Just like don't take I-24 on Friday between 4 and 6 and you're gonna be okay.
Anywhere else.
Yeah. And this next one, I really have no idea what's going to happen with this, but I was working on this week. So this, oh, where's my little thing? I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. Eek. So this is Glass Street right here in East Chattanooga. And we've been doing a lot of coverage of Glass Street over the past few years because there's a group there that's been putting forth this really big effort to revitalize the area. And so it's an interesting story, and I didn't really know what story I wanted to tell, but I was interested in property there. So I got the Hamilton County GIS department to send me shape files for all of these little squares. These are all parcels. So I said I gave them like the boundaries that I wanted, and they sent me all of these little parcels. And I put them on top of this Google map. And every parcel also came with some data. It came with some data that told me how much the property was worth, who owns the property, the last 3 times that it was sold, and the address of it. So like here I thought, I put all the shapes on there, and I thought I'm just gonna look at it and see property value. So I assigned all these different colors. The navy is properties that are worth more than $150,000. Actually, I made, that says 152. So this must be 200. Like I just made this yesterday. So I'm seeing some mistakes here. But anyways, the dark ones are worth more, whatever that number may be. I will figure out at some point. And so that kind of at a quick glance gives you a sense of what property is worth in this area. But like there are also some other things you can do with this. So I was thinking, I wonder which properties the county and the city owns. So rather than saying assign the color based on property value, I said turn everything that the city or the county owns yellow and leave the rest teal. So that's this map here that pops up. So like you can glance and see, you know, this is owned by the Chattanooga Housing Authority. This is the Harriet Tubman development that they recently shut down. And this is the Chattanooga Housing Authority too. That's not that surprising. The bigger ones are the Chattanooga Housing Authority. But there are also all these other little properties. And I kind of wonder what they are. I don't know what they are. I might make a phone call about them if there seems to be something interesting or unusual. Sometimes I don't know what phone calls to make until I like make a map and turn something yellow and something looks fishy, and then you want to pick up the phone and ask somebody about it. There might be a story there. So like I'm showing you this just because I want to show how visualizing some of this stuff can help me think of questions that I want to ask. And it helps me start conversations with other reporters in the newsroom. So I was talking with one of my colleagues yesterday about this. I showed it to her. And she was saying like, well, I'm also interested in public housing and this idea that public housing is shutting down in Chattanooga. So maybe we can like make a map that shows where all the public housing is and where all the public housing that used to be here is that's shut down. So I think we're going to do that, and that'll create some more questions we might want to look into. So I don't know what'll come of this, but it's kind of a work in progress. So there's more of a movement in journalism. Now, journalism is kind of always behind the curve with tech, but some of the great papers out there and news sites are starting to embed people who can code into the newsroom. And that's something that I'm trying to start at the Times Free Press. We do have developers, but they're like on another floor in the corner, and they don't always want to work with us. So I'm trying to learn some of this stuff so that I can use this kind of technology to be a journalist and tell better stories about Chattanooga. These are some great resources. Mike Bostock is the one who's developed d3.js. He has 1 million examples on the web. If you want to look him up, you'll find tons of super helpful stuff. Scott Murray also does a lot with D3. I showed you some of his examples. And he just put out a video tutorial on O'Reilly that I downloaded, and I'm watching. It's really good. You should check that out if you're interested. And of course, d3js.org has a ton of examples. And this is me if you want to contact me. So I don't know how much time you want to spend talking about. Okay, so if anybody has any questions, you can ask them. If they're super technical, I might need like help from a couple of you guys answering them. But yeah, go for it if anyone has any questions. Yeah.
I have questions about data sets. So are you taking census data and turning it into like GeoJSON, and then there's an object in D3 to represent polygons, or what's kind of the process?
Yeah.
Because I know you get shape files from the census entire line, right? So what's the kind of conversion process?
Yeah.
Are you throwing that in a database, or is it just like a flat data file of like GeoJSON or kind of stuff?
So I've actually done it 2 ways. One is getting the shape files, like you said. Oh, I was supposed to repeat the question. He's asking how I get the data, the data and the shape files, and how I use them together sort of to build these visualizations. And so, yeah, I get the shape files usually, except for the case of the stuff I got from the Hamilton County GIS department. The shapes are completely separate from the data. So like, there has to be one thing in common, right? So you can match them up. So like the shape files I get from the census, if they're zip codes, that's great because they all have a zip code assigned to them. And then I can get from a different part of the census website the actual data that I want to attach to every zip code. And I can use those two separately. So like I have had all of the like metadata that you see popping up when I hover over it in like a CSV file, and I actually joined it in the code with the yeah, I do. I turn the shapefile into a GeoJSON file. Or the other thing that I've done, which I kind of prefer, is to open the shapefile in QGIS, or you could use any GIS software, and I actually join the data in that program, and it spits out another shapefile, and then I can convert that shapefile into GeoJSON, and it keeps all of the attributes that I've joined to it. Does that make sense?
It does. I've been trying to do this with Google Maps and PostGIS, and it's been really hard.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can show you a file if that's interesting. Of like, let's see here. Now y'all see everything I'm working on. Trying to remember how I did it in Glass. This is, oh, you know what? I don't even think it's in here. These are all my shape files. Then I have a CSV. Well.
So does D3 actually ingest GeoJSON, or does it know how to deal with the shapefile as well?
No, it deals with GeoJSON or TopoJSON. And yeah, I've used GeoJSON. So yeah, you can't load a shapefile into it. You do have to convert it. And I use OGR to OGR to do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of a two-part question. One, what's the largest data set which is massive that you've utilized, and have you noticed any performance differences with some of the mobile devices that are a little bit more processor limited versus I'm running it on my brand new MacBook and everything's beautiful?
Yeah. So I think that for the stuff that I've worked on, the biggest part of the data is in those shapes that it's drawing, because it's a set of coordinates that determine the shape. So I actually have used this site that's been super helpful called mapshaper.org. Okay, so you can drag a shape file onto here, which I think I have one pulled up right here, actually. Glass Street shape. Let's see that. And so if that's the full file, like in all its hugeness that I'm starting with, I can simplify it to the point that I think it's still useful for the project that I'm doing. And actually this isn't the best example because it's mostly squares, but like for zip codes or census tracts, there's all these little squiggly lines that you really don't need unless you're doing something super up close or really precise. So like I can usually put it down to like 10% or less and then export it again as a shape file and start working from that. And that really cuts down on the file size and helps load time a lot. So I always start by doing that.
How does that affect the zoom level on like Google Maps? I mean, if you get it down to 10%, once you start zooming in on 4 blocks.
Yeah, it does affect it. So like depending on, I mean, there might be a better way to do this, but I usually just think about what I'm using the project for. Like how likely are people to want to zoom down to the block level and see exactly where, and they might be in some projects, but it's kind of like a trade-off. So I just kind of think about how people are going to use it. And yeah, if it's going to be like block level, super zoomed in, then I might not want to make the file quite as small because it makes the shapes more general. And then like the river doesn't match up with like the zip code line and it looks kind of funky. So it's a trade-off to think about. Yeah.
What base level maps are you using?
What do you mean?
Is D3 drawing a map?
Yeah. So you can use it on other kinds of maps. You could use it on OpenStreetMap, or you can just use it like, you don't have to put it on top of a map at all. I just have for some of these because like a census tract, nobody knows what a census tract number really means for neighborhoods. So I figure people want to like see on a map what neighborhood it's in, but you could put it on any other kind of map or not at all. Yeah.
I'm interested in the process of data journalism. You mentioned some of the sources that you came
came up with, you know, done some of these visualizations from. Could you talk a little bit more about some of the other sources you've used and maybe some that you're hoping to use in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question, because that's something I think we've been talking a lot about in Chattanooga with this open data movement. And, you know, like I would love, when you're saying hope to use in the future, I would love it if I could access all of everything that Hamilton County GIS has, if I could just like pull that in and use it instead of having to go through a process of requesting a specific boundary and then depending on them to send me all of it with the exact data I want. They have this huge data set. I wish I could just like get into it and use it for whatever I wanted. What other sources? I mean, I've used the census, obviously, is the biggest one that I use. And like for that project I showed you, I was using EPB. And I don't know, off the top of my head, I mean, there was one that was like we did on Volkswagen and people's commute time to work. And I think that came straight from Volkswagen. I mean, a reporter got it and she had a list of how long it took, I guess, how many people worked at Volkswagen from every zip code in the area. So that was like something straight from a company that we used. And she had this list and I like took it from her and put it on a map. So yeah, like things that reporters get in their normal reporting from a private entity, I can use that, or like anything that's public data. Is that good enough? Okay.
How do you, in a situation, verify the data is accurate?
Yeah.
Someone that maybe Volkswagen gives you some data, they're not spinning it all.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that whenever a reporter gets something, you know, there's a certain level of trust, but you also have to like verify as best as you can. So, I mean, I think the first thing is just to ask exactly how they came up with the data. And if something seems a little fishy, then like ask more questions or don't use it. And yeah, people do try to skew their data sometimes. So you always have to kind of figure out where it's coming from and what it exactly means. But you do build trust with different entities. And some people you probably trust more than others with data just because you have a history with them. So just normal fact checking that a reporter would do. Yeah.
Can you see what your D3 code looks like? How you actually use it in the code that you have?
Yeah, if I can find some. I was hoping nobody would want to see my code. I don't know if like anybody has ever looked at it, so I'm a little self-conscious about this.
Right.
I mean, you guys might be horrified. What'd you say? Okay. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, maybe I'll show you afterwards. That was okay. That was a cop out. I'm sorry, but it was on the spot. Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
What are some resources that you use to get yourself JavaScript?
I don't know, Google, like mostly. Yeah. Chris, are you wanting the floor yet, or? Now that they're asking to see my code, I'm gonna call you up.
That was awesome.
Okay. That's all.